There is one detail in Lioness Season 3, Episode 4 that feels far too important to simply disappear into the background. The 5 U.S. senators. At first glance, this sounds like another political detail in a series already filled with government officials, intelligence operations, military decisions, and international threats. But the more you think about it, the stranger it becomes. Why specifically 5? Why introduce these senators into the conversation? And most importantly, why has the story still left their true significance unresolved? Because Lioness has never been a series where political names are mentioned just for decoration. Behind almost every important name is a decision, an agenda, a hidden relationship, or somebody trying to control the outcome of an operation. And that makes Kaytlyn's investigation particularly interesting. She may be getting dangerously close to something that connects the political world to everything happening around Joe. And if that connection is real, then Joe's current situation may be much bigger than we originally thought. Let's start with the obvious question. Why should we care about 5 senators when Joe's immediate situation appears to be the bigger problem? Because that's exactly how Lioness likes to hide its biggest clues. The show constantly moves between the people carrying out operations and the people making decisions behind closed doors. The operators see one piece of the puzzle. The politicians see another. And the people watching from the shadows may see the entire picture. That's why these 5 senators could represent something much larger than 5 individual politicians. They could represent a political faction. They could represent competing interests. Or they could all be connected to a single decision that eventually leads directly back to Joe. And Kaytlyn may be the person positioned to discover that connection. The interesting thing about Kaytlyn is that she doesn't necessarily need to be inside the action to become dangerous. She only needs access to the right information. Because once someone starts connecting names, dates, decisions, money, and operations, secrets become much harder to hide. And that could be exactly what is happening now. There's an important difference between Kaytlyn and Joe. Joe is trained to identify threats. Kaytlyn is positioned to identify patterns. That distinction could become extremely important. Joe can walk into a dangerous situation and recognize when something isn't right. But Kaytlyn can potentially step back and ask a much more dangerous question. Why is all of this happening in the first place? And that question could lead directly to the senators. Imagine Kaytlyn discovers that several seemingly unrelated decisions eventually point toward the same group of people. One political decision leads to another. A government appointment creates another opportunity. An intelligence operation produces another consequence. And eventually, 5 names keep appearing. At that point, the senators stop being background characters. They become a pattern. And once Kaytlyn recognizes the pattern, someone is going to have a serious problem. Because powerful people can survive individual accusations. What they cannot easily survive is someone uncovering the connection between all of them. My first theory is that these 5 senators are connected to a larger political network. I'm not saying all 5 are necessarily villains. In fact, that's what could make this storyline more complicated. One senator could be directly involved. Another could simply be protecting a political interest. Another could have been manipulated. And another might not even realize how deep the situation goes. That would create a much more realistic political conspiracy than simply revealing 5 corrupt politicians. And it would also fit the tone of Lioness. The real danger isn't always one evil person sitting in a room giving orders. Sometimes the danger is a system where several people make small decisions that eventually create one enormous crisis. If that's what the writers are building, then Kaytlyn may not be looking for a single villain. She could be uncovering an entire chain of responsibility, and somewhere in that chain could be the answer to what happened to Joe. But there's another theory I think is even more interesting. What if the 5 senators aren't equally important? What if one of them is the real key? The other 4 could simply be there to make the connection harder to identify. Think about how investigations work. If you have one suspicious name, you investigate that person immediately. But if you have 5 names connected to the same issue, the picture becomes much more complicated. Everyone starts looking at the group, and that gives the real target somewhere to hide. So perhaps Kaytlyn eventually discovers that 4 of the senators are connected only indirectly. But one of them has a much deeper relationship with the events surrounding Joe. Maybe that person authorized something. Maybe they benefited from an operation. Maybe they helped suppress information. Or maybe they know exactly why Joe became a target. And if Kaitlyn identifies that person, the entire storyline could change overnight. Because suddenly, she wouldn't just have a theory, she would have a name. Now let's get to the biggest question. Could these senators somehow be connected to Joe's captivity? This is where the theory becomes much darker. Joe is not an ordinary operative. She knows too much. She has been involved in sensitive operations. She has seen how governments operate behind the scenes. She knows what happens when political interests collide with intelligence objectives. So if someone powerful needed Joe removed from the equation, capturing her would accomplish more than simply stopping one operative. It could also prevent her from revealing information. And that's why Joe's captivity may need to be viewed from a different perspective. Instead of asking, who is holding Joe, we should also be asking, who benefits from Joe being held? Those are two completely different questions. The people physically holding her may not be the people who actually want her there. And if the 5 senators are connected to whoever benefits from her disappearance, then Kaitlyn's investigation could put her on a collision course with a much more powerful enemy. But here's where I think the story could completely fool us. What if the 5 senators aren't actually the final answer? What if they're the distraction? This would be a classic Lioness move. Give the audience 5 powerful names. Let everyone start investigating those names. Then reveal that the real person behind everything was somewhere else entirely. Because the more obvious the clue becomes, the more suspicious it gets. Perhaps the senators are connected to the situation.